I just had one of the best IPAs of my life the other night.
Really?
Poured into tea?
You ever had it? Neither have I. Ready?
Okay. Today we're going to review the new Star Wars movie, Rogue One. Thoughts?
Does Rogue One actually have a place in the Star Wars saga? Is it a traditional Star Wars movie? And one of the main points of that argument is the fact that the entire Star Wars saga up to this point has been about Anakin Skywalker, his growth, his downfall, and his redemption.
Yeah. So obviously Anakin... spoiler alert, by the way, if you haven't seen it, then you should probably go watch it, then watch this review. Anakin is in this movie as Darth Vader, but he does not have a prominent role. It is Anakin's least prominent role in, I think, every single Star Wars movie.
Force Awakens is still about Luke. Really, the search for Luke.
Yeah.
And so that's still his legacy, Anakin's legacy.
Yeah,
and it's the continuation of his redemption.
Star Wars so far has always been about the Skywalker family. The prequels are about Anakin.
His growth, his downfall, and his redemption.
And his redemption. Perfect. Yeah, the whole saga is that, basically. Yeah. And then Luke, and then, of course, Leia, and then the characters they meet. So this is really the first Star Wars which has nothing to do with any of those characters. The main characters, I mean, of course, in Force Awakens, Rey and Finn are not related, or well, we don't know yet, but they're apparently...
They're probably not related.
No. Rey and Finn are not related to the Skywalker family as far as we know. But Finn, I mean Rey.
Okay. Definitely Luke's son.
Okay.
Exactly.
From that point, what do we say? Do we say that Rogue One is an actual Star Wars movie, or is it just kind of an off?
Another kind of hint at that is the typical intro is missing. So again, we're lacking the story, the development, the connection. It's kind of apart from itself. They don't have a desire to lead into it and make that additional tie.
Yeah, and the problem, whenever something like that, when you see that in a movie, in a series, when something is different, you can't help but think, was that an artistic decision, or was that a technical decision, or a financial decision?
Or a legal decision.
Or a legal decision, exactly. It's are these guys saying, hey, from the very get-go, when we're writing the storyboard, we're not going to have the original George Lucas title sequence and the John Williams soundtrack. Mm-hmm. Because that was not... It tricked you into thinking it was the John Williams soundtrack, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
So, was that a legal decision? They said, well, you can't do that. But Disney owns all of it. So I hope it was an artistic decision. Of course, that's what you want it to be. But maybe it wasn't.
From the get-go, it was supposed to be different,
Yeah.
It wasn't supposed to be it wasn't episode anything. It was Rogue One,
Yeah.
It wasn't supposed to necessarily, it was supposed to be this is also happening and this is also affecting the main, vein of Star Wars.
And another thing is that they successfully killed off all the characters.
That is the best part about this movie.
So if you haven't seen it, I can't even say spoiler alert. You're gonna have to edit that in. That was crazy.
Yeah. So not only did they cut off the intro tie to the series, killed any possibility of a future connection
of a sequel. Yeah, it was great.
Unless they do another offshoot and connect those characters to it. So those people could still act in other movies.
Yeah, of course, but that's a great point, that this movie really exists in and of itself in the Star Wars universe, and I think that's one of the greatest assets to it, really, is that it's just its own film. It's not trying to be something else. And the way I like to think of it is that it's like historical fiction, if you can call it that. Because you think of, we know the Star Wars stories. We know the prequels. We know what comes before. We know what's going to come after. So this movie comes right in the middle. They drop us down, and that's why it's an offshoot, and that's why it's almost like you're kind of detached. The first, I don't know about you guys, but the first 30 minutes of the movie, I felt like I was watching an educational video about Star Wars. Not to say I wasn't entertained, but it was more okay, this is the universe. They jumped from so many different worlds so quickly, but at the same time, I mean, if we're comparing it to the prequels, this movie was 1,000 times better than any of the prequels. The biggest pro to the prequels, for all of their downfalls and all of the, terrible acting and dialogue and everything, is that they were at least original. They were brand new movies. compared to The Force Awakens, I love The Force Awakens. I'm a huge Force Awakens fan,
No,
but it was literally A New Hope just retold. And that's its biggest downfall. Then this movie is almost like a combination of the two. It has the originality of the prequels, but it has the actual characterization and depth of the later movies.
Yeah, the depth, the maturity level is much higher. You know?
Yeah,
It's much more real, genuine.
It was made for a real Star Wars audience. I feel like the prequels were like, we want to get kids involved in this, you know. Like,
Sure.
Yeah.
Like, Anakin's a kid, like, kids can relate to this. Oh, like, cool, I want to be a pod racer, you know?
Jar Jar
Which
Binks,
was like, it could have been, you know, let's just not get into the whole prequels thing. I do want to say, though,
conversation.
the biggest difference for me between this and The Force Awakens...
Good for my herpes.
Yeah, and your sore throat. The biggest difference between this and Force Awakens was that in Force Awakens, I really legitimately became attached to the characters, and in this, it wasn't so much. I was just kind of attached to the story and everything that was happening.
Yeah.
And the characters were good, but like Force Awakens, like I looked at Rey and I was like, I could marry this girl and be satisfied for the rest of my life. You know, like this girl is amazing.
Yeah.
I think it might just be the novelty of the whole traditional Star Wars intro.
Yeah, that was
when
like
they brought in
so
all characters.
dramatic.
Like I cried during Force Awakens multiple times, and this one I didn't cry, but it was still really good. You know?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Historical fiction. It's like educational. It's like you're entertained and you're watching it, but it doesn't have that same emotional connection that Force Awakens managed to succeed with. You know, you were just like, oh my god, I feel like I'm in the 70s watching Star Wars for the first time.
Yeah.
At least that's, I hope, what it felt like.
Yeah.
Somewhat.
I like how they didn't overdo anything effects-wise in either of them, though. They kept it very, like, a lot of it looked aesthetically like the original 3 movies.
It did.
You know?
They have, Star Wars has this interesting universe that reminds me of Harry Potter in that it's advanced, it's more advanced than us, but at the same time it's old-timey.
It
like
doesn't,
the binoculars are all
necessarily more
staticky and
like
shit
that.
like that. You know, I love that.
Speaking of that, I love how they tried to be as close as they could for the Death Star activation sequence.
Yeah,
They
absolutely.
I'm glad they didn't do a bunch
Just
of
like
crazy
the other movies.
CGI.
Yeah.
It was the exact same. That was well placed.
And that was great, but at the same time, the problem with that, right, is the same criticism I was talking about with the prequels compared to the old movies, which is that nowadays they realize, hey, the prequels sucked. Everyone agrees that the prequels suck. So why don't we show people from the old movies what it looked like, and then everyone's gonna like it? And it's true.
Yeah,
we do like it, and that's what they do. So it's like it works for these movies. Hopefully they'll come up with new things that we remember and like, which they succeeded with Force Awakens a little bit, like BB-8 and things like that. There were some new things that did succeed.
What's the
Jar Jar Binks failed? BB-8 succeeded.
The droid's name in the most.
Was it KO-52?
I have no idea.
KO,
just in case.
K2SO. There you go.
He was very good. You know, the way they did.
He was great,
He was great.
That was a totally new droid. I'm really glad.
Yeah.
They really have some good people working on these movies. Clearly, you can see that they're giving it their best shot. It's not lazy. With the prequels, you just kind of feel like it was lazy. And we kind of already touched on this, but the ending just surprised me so much. I'm sure if you're familiar with the Star Wars universe and you're really a Star Wars geek, then you knew they were all going to die. But I, for one, had no idea.
Just make sure you say spoiler alert.
They all die. I was like, oh my god, main characters actually die. It's like Hamlet. You haven't seen that in forever, you know.
Yeah.
So that was great. Even
was
though
really
parts
cool
of
that they did
parts
that.
of it were a little predictable before that. Like, you know, everyone who dies in this movie before the ending dies with one of those typical death scenes of like holding the person as they're dying. So when they didn't have a scene like that for Captain or Pilot Andor, Cassian, I don't remember. When they didn't have that scene for the pilot, you know, they didn't have like a holding his head death scene.
Oh, yeah.
It was like, okay, he's still alive, come on. You know, they're gonna have a dramatic death scene for him. That was a little bit too predictable. And then the other thing I didn't like, I want to see one Star Wars where they don't hang off the edge of the cliff. Like, that's not common. That doesn't happen very often. World War II and Vietnam, and obviously those aren't space battles, but like, I've never seen that happen. Okay, I'm done.
All right.
You guys want to sign off?
Sign off.
Say bye.
Bye.
It was a good video.
Done.